Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I am your host, and today, of course, we have with us Catherine Cooke. Catherine, how are you today?
Good.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on again. As you guys know, we are continuing our review of The Mandalorian Season 3, which we've waited so long for. Certainly, this one starts out, it's kind of Bo-Katan wishes and Din Djarin dreams. You know something? I've heard a lot of things in this episode that I didn't even know about, Catherine. For example, I didn't know what splonking was. I didn't know what pog soup is or pog soup. However, there was something that we did see in this episode that I think we've all been waiting to see, and we always thought it was myth, and legend, but it's actually something that it exists, and it kind of makes sense with everything that happened on Mandalore that it might rear its head out so that we could see it. But yes, Catherine, exactly. This fantastic mythosaur that was the stuff of legends that I didn't think we'd ever see this, Catherine. And I have to say that they didn't disappoint us in this episode, although I wasn't expecting it. And I guess I should have expected it. Maybe it was pretty obvious. But that was the last thing I thought he would find down there. I have to say that it kind of threw me a little bit. We kind of start off the episode where we see Pele, who is a fan favorite, certainly somebody that everybody totally loves. With her, he's going there asking her for parts, and the Jawas are there, and Pele's as snarky as ever. And apparently, it's a big celebration time. Catherine, is it the same celebration that we saw during when Anakin had to race? Is that the same celebration?
Well, she calls it. She says the Boonta Eve, so that's the big race.
Okay, so certainly it's a nod to Anakin winning that race so many not too long ago, because he's the same age as he and Grogu were born in the same year, which is quite ironic. And Catherine, I got to give you street cred here for showing up with a Grogu here. Oh, hello, sweetheart. Hi. I absolutely love that, Catherine. I love it. I love it to death. But I have to say, this episode certainly did kind of change spirits a little bit. I wasn't expecting a turnaround like this, Catherine, because when they first told us that Din was going to be going off to Mandalore, this broken, damaged planet that's supposedly poisoned, but not really poisoned and all messed up, I thought this was kind of like the end. It's like he was going into some hole or somewhere, and I really thought he was just going to find nothing. It's not so much the idea that he would be hurt or damaged. I thought he wasn't going to find anything, Catherine. I thought it was just going to be like a junkyard wasteland with nothing there. His hopes would be dashed. No kind of recognizable city or anything like that. It's very funny how when they get to the planet, Catherine, you can see it's got like the green crystal, which we knew we would see from the relic that they showed us in the previous episode. But it's very funny how the whole planet is encrusted with this green crystal. It's like a very odd thing. It almost looks like a gemstone, Catherine. Is it implying that it's kind of a diamond in a rough? This green, it's not so repulsive looking, but it looks like a gemstone. What do you think about how it truly is encrusted in this green gem-like quality stone, which is probably just, some kind of odd form of carbon for all we know? What do you think about how they showed us what the outside of Mandalore looked like?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the crystal or why it's there or where he even got the piece that he got, because he doesn't make any comments about it when he gets there. So I don't really know. It's like, okay, there's crystals there. And then the scavengers that are there, it's like, okay, so I could see that it's become a scrapyard, certainly salvageable, just traded on the black market, that kind of thing, with these biomechanical type aliens, which reminded me a bit of the aliens from the original War of the Worlds from 53. It's kind of weird, the real eyeball, that kind of stuff going on. And then, you got the Morlocks in the caverns. Yeah. That look the same as the ones from the remake of the Time Machine from 20 years ago. I looked at that, I'm like, hey, those look like Morlocks. And it's like, okay, so you got that going on. But like Bo says, it's like there's no Mandalorians. Like it's just, but there's also no Imperial presence there either. It's just kind of abandoned, save for some scrappers and those native aliens.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't even know how long, because at some point Bo-Katan does make a comment about, well, it wasn't that long ago that this place was a great place to live, and I think it's very funny because it can't be that long ago. Like it couldn't be more than 15 years or so. I don't know the exact date. But boy, it sure does look like it might have happened yesterday. It doesn't look like it's something that happened, 10, 20 years ago. So I was very surprised to see how, the outside looked. Like I said, it looks like this crust of green agate or something, and you could go and harvest all that green agate. I think it's very interesting that that was the color of the exterior. I almost wondered, why that color green, whether it was significant in the culture or whatever it was, but it certainly did grab my attention the way it looked. And so, when Din and Grogu land on the planet, Din doesn't even want to go out there, which is very funny because he's there to go into these waters, but he doesn't even want to bother to go out there. And I thought it was very interesting, especially since he kind of has this reluctant astromech. And as we know, astromechs are AIs. They got these personalities. And this one, he's just like, look, I've been through a lot already, and I don't really feel like going through this right now. And, Pele sells him on the idea, but we knew that there would be an astromech in that port at some point, Catherine. It looks like Din's clan is growing. Is he going to continue to add on people to the clan?
Or not that could fit in that ship, I don't think. But R5 going all back to the original film, so that was kind of neat. I don't get why R5 was so scared of the idea of going to Mandalore. It's like, what do you know? What secrets are you keeping? Type of thing. It's like, what can you tell us? But yeah, so he's going to need to upgrade to another ship if he intends to add more people, because that's already because it's like the first ship that he had, the Razor Crest, you can actually live in that thing. It's like you can't live in the N1. You have to be you're camping out kind of thing. So I would expect that at some point he's going to upgrade. Because again, like we mentioned last week, it still looks like the N1 is kind of run down and kind of like a garage shop hot rod. Like it's not really up to snuff. And he just kind of accepted Pele's offer of R5. He didn't even look for any other droids that he could have used. Because really he wanted IG-11 rebooted because he needed an assassin droid, a warrior.
That's right.
And he concedes that, okay, I'll just take the R5 just to see if the air is breathable. And I'm thinking, well, you could try and look around and find, there's got to be other, like when Pele says, oh, IG, that's like an ancient model, as if to imply there's more modern ones that she could find for him. But he's just kind of like, oh, no, I'll just, take this. And then, off he goes. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, he was quite compromising, even though he was very specific about what he was looking for. So I guess he was just taking what he could get. But I think that at some point, maybe Pele might, score, because since she's so close to these Jawas and has Jawa friends and has dated a Jawa, she kind of knows exactly how to get stuff from them. And I'm assuming she got the chip from Mandalore from a Jawa. It had to be Pele who gave him that chip. So we do know that. But continuing on to the story, after R5 goes sort of below the surface of the crust, this agate green colored crust, of course they lose contact with the poor astromech, and Din has to go in afterwards. And we do see these Morlocks, and they, like you said, they are carbon copies of Morlocks. And I think that fortunately later on we do find out what they're called from Bo-Katan, and I think they're called, what are they called? I have it written down here. It doesn't kind of roll off of my tongue what they're called, but
like Aga Prees or Anna Puri, something like that. Some longer name.
Yeah, it is like some very kind of unusual name, which I would have never guessed that's what they were.
Another thing I noticed about Mandalore is that aside from the green crystal, the surface is very dark. Like in the Clone Wars, it was very white and stark white, bright, barren, and you just had the domed cities. And now you go here and it looks almost like there's a lot of black granite everywhere. And it's like, well, did they cook the planet and burn away the dust or whatever was under? Is that what was underneath all along? It's like it's not really clear what's going on. But the fact that we didn't see these Morlocks, because that's just what I'm going to call them now. So
Alamites is what they're called.
Alamites. It's like we did. That's funny because you say might and it makes you think of like a bug or something.
Yeah.
But we didn't see any of them in Clone Wars, and there was never any mention that there were, like these are like big guys too, and they're not like they're primitive, but not so primitive because I mean they didn't really make it clear. Are they the ones running the scrapyard down below, or are those robots just kind of autonomous and it's like a separate thing? It's not too clear, but it's like, okay, this kind of, even with the green light, the way it shines in there, is just really neat in the caverns. Looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know why I equated the agate crust to kind of like what Superman can't handle is the kryptonite, which I think is green. And I almost equated that with this is this crust that, Mandalorians can't penetrate or bust through or get rid of, as if like that was kind of a weakness to them rediscovering the planet. But we see that even when Din goes in there, he gets first attacked and he's not prepared. He feels quite unprepared. Is he like off kilter? Has he lost some of his concentration in this entire trip? Because it feels like he might be a little not quite himself. Those creatures were tough to fight, but even so, Catherine, it felt like he was not quite himself. Does he seem a little off on this mission?
Yeah, considering the amount of time he's been preparing for it, like apparently 2 years, he said, and he went to try and recruit Bo-Katan last week, and she said no. So he recognizes that he needs a crew for this, and yet once they say no, he just kind of, I need an assassin droid, but now I'll just settle for an astromech droid. It's like, really? And then he just kind of, admit that there's not that many obstacles. It's like, okay, some Morlocks, you just needed a little more firepower and those robots, but it's not like he didn't seem that ready. And it's just like, so, well, wait a minute, you knew you needed firepower for this, and then you're like, why didn't you ask Boba Fett? Like even Pelimato asked him when he showed up, you're here to go do some stuff with Boba Fett and run some guns. It's like, dude, just go ask him. He'd probably be happy to help you with this.
Absolutely. And it is kind of bewildering in a sense, where he's kind of alone again on these solo missions when he doesn't have to be really. And another kind of interesting thing is that, that harvester droid, as you said, that reminded you of another film entirely, was actually quite, scary, especially when he inserted that catheter in him, started to like literally suck his blood. And I'm like, is he a spider? Because I know some insects do that, where they'll pull out the fluids of people. But that was the last thing I thought he'd be doing. I thought he'd be harvesting the Beskar. Why was this creature more interested in harvesting the Mandalorian, let's say, for his bodily fluids?
Well, because it seemed to be a biomechanical thing, because it looks like mostly a robot, but then you see the eyeball and it's like a living eye. And we don't know if this is like a crawling eye situation and that's all there is, and it's just got an apparatus built around it. Who built that thing? Because it's not like it built it itself if it's just an eyeball. So he's sucking the blood to survive. Kind of like the brain bug in Starship Troopers sucking people's brains out. And it's like he's sucking, Din's blood. It's like for sustenance, I guess. It's like, oh, cool. I don't get this very often. Slurp, slurp, slurp. It's like, okay. So it's doing this very, old 50, the whole thing with it, like the Morlocks and these robots and the sucking the blood. It's like 50s sci-fi horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a homage back to the classics. But I couldn't help but smile when Grogu kind of helped. He went, he stayed back a little bit during the whole thing, and he tried to free Din. And I was actually happy that he wasn't able to do it, because the last thing we want to see is where Grogu is like going ahead and getting him out of every single bit of trouble out there, because we know that that's just not realistic, and we don't want to see stuff like that. I mean, it just would spoil it, I think. And so Grogu kind of steps up there, looks around. And then he does the Force, and then he realizes it sets off an alarm. Yes, he did exactly like that, Catherine.
Use your hands, do the magic hand thing.
And, it's very interesting because I'm noticing that when you go to the promo of Star Wars and Disney, you actually see Grogu kind of use the Force, and then there's like a little bit of like the air gets very wavy. and the waviness is obviously the Force, which I'm very impressed with. So I think that the idea that this is now a part of his life, and it is constant, is true, but he was not able to rescue Din. Like that was not going to happen. And I remember saying to myself, he better not be able to rescue him, because this would be ridiculous, right? So he's not able to, and Din tells him, get Bo-Katan. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God they went to Bo-Katan's house just a few minutes ago, because if they had not done that, I don't think Grogu would have really understood or where to go. There's a chance that he might not have made it or been able to navigate back.
Well, yeah, because he showed it to him on the map when they were flying into Mandalore too. He pointed out the different planets and said that, being a navigator, you have to know where you're going. He says, this is where we went to see Bo-Katan.
Yeah, and it is very interesting, Catherine, seeing this creature, supposedly disarm Din, and there's the dark saber on the floor, and here's another weapon on the floor. It doesn't even care. It doesn't even want any of that. And of course, we knew that this was the case, because when Din first went into the planet, he kind of found these, once again, these Mandalorian helmets, just buried in the sand, indicating that particular, let's say, that armor is not important to anybody. And I thought that was also very interesting. And so Din finds himself in that, and Grogu flies over to Bo-Katan, and immediately she has this, like, she's a different person. Catherine, was she just repressing her feelings? Did she really want to go with Din after all? Was she just repressing because she was just a little salty that Din is still kind of like this sort of, skipping along on his quest? And, she's been trying forever to rejoin, I guess, the clans of Mandalore, and can't do it. And he's just skipping along like it's, it's another day. And, that was yesterday, but today it's today. Was she just resentful as to why she didn't go with him, you think? Because she was very quick to want to help him when she found out he was in need.
Yeah, I think she's, again, there's something else going on with her, because she had followers when she didn't have the Darksaber. And for her to say that that's the reason they left, it's like, no. Unless it's a situation where, because they didn't know where the Darksaber was initially, and seeing that he was the one who had it at the end of season 2, that maybe they decided, oh, I guess if we're not going to challenge him for it, I guess we're going to leave, which, again, I didn't find too believable, because if they want it, they just challenge him for it. So there's something else going on there, which is why she didn't want to go. But the fact that she's willing to go and save him, and the fact that the kid is the one who showed up, told her that it was obviously serious, but she also knows that he's still got the Darksaber. She doesn't want that to fall into enemy hands. So I think she sees that opportunity, which is why she's like, okay, let's go. Even though she's not acting super eager about it, she doesn't want to be obvious, but I think she's totally like, this image right here. It's like, yeah, she's got it now. This is what she came for.
Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I need to answer Tom's question. So Tom has a question about the Darksaber, possession of the Darksaber. Bo-Katan used to own the Darksaber at one time. She was in possession of it, and she was pretty much leading a group of Mandalorians, and she knows how to wield the Darksaber. At some point in history in the Clone Wars, she did that along with what's the girl's name? Sabine Wren, who also ends up having possession of the Darksaber for a while. So Bo-Katan knows how to use it. The question is whether you are worthy of wielding it. And this is a huge thing in their culture about how you obtain the Darksaber. She obtains it here, Catherine. She obtains the Darksaber. It's on the floor. And I had actually made a joke. I said, I bet you, this is what I said in the last episode, I bet you something happens to Din and she picks up the Darksaber. And this is exactly what happened, Catherine. Now, that's very rare that a prediction I make, kind of off the cuff, would actually happen. But she picks it up. She uses it to, obviously defeat everybody. And I think we might even be able to argue, Catherine, if she didn't have the Darksaber, she might have had trouble defeating, the Morlock creatures, which are the Alamites, and the mechanical thing. Would she have been able to beat them without that Darksaber?
Not as easily, unless she used the rockets there that she's got in her jetpack. But I wasn't really crazy because if it's that easy to get the Darksaber, you should have just followed him around for a couple of years and waited for the inevitable beatdown at some point. Or she could have paid a guy to go, hey, beat the shit out of him. And then, once they dropped it, she could pick it up. Because I thought there would be a more narratively, because it poses a unique narrative challenge. It's like, how do you get her to have the Darksaber? And I thought it was kind of easy. Oh, he gets beat. This piece of, scrap metal, whoever falls on him, and he can't get out and knocks it out of his hand. It's like, come on. But okay, she's got it now, which is the important thing, because that's going to be what's going to provide more narrative drive. Because if he had purged himself in the waters, because again, he doesn't really have a goal, because he doesn't want to lead Mandalore. He just wants to get his respect back from the clan, and he just happened to have a Darksaber at that point. So it's like, yes, this needs to change hands so we could get the story going, because currently, with Moff Gideon supposedly still in prison, there's no real story. And with Grogu having turned his back on the Jedi, it's like, there's no real story at this point. Like, we need a plot. Like, what is going to be the driving force of this season? And I think that's it right here. And now that Bo's got the saber back, she's going for it. Like, we're going to go rebuild the clans and reunite and all that kind of thing. Even though she's not really surprised to see that Mandalore's in tatters and it's not really worth settling there, but she might want to take them to another world and, start again.
What you're saying makes total sense. And, I think it's very interesting that, she's just able to pick it up literally off the floor. Of course, anyone can, because the Darksaber, we saw in Clone Wars how it kind of like was at a temple. And that's when Ezra kind of came across it and grabbed it. And then that's how, of course, Bo-Katan and Sabine end up getting it. I think, guys, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it is very interesting because, in regards to Din, then all of a sudden, we find he's at the sacred waters. Catherine, this is going by fast. I mean,
that was weird too, because when she's like, "What, you're going back in there?" and she kind of teases him that, there's nothing sacred about the waters, right? And he's like, "Without the creed, we're nothing." And she's like, "Well, those are just stories. We told her we don't really need to believe in it anymore." And he made it sound like it's going to be a long journey back down in there. Like, they got a lot more stuff to face, but then they don't. It just kind of cuts to the next thing, and they're just right there. I'm like, oh, well, this wasn't that bad, because she's making it sound like suicide to keep going down there, and yet the very next scene they're there. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it is very interesting. It's clearly a very well-built city. Those mines are tens of thousands of years old, she says. And of course, the big surprise was seeing the mythosaur and, just having that satisfaction of knowing that the mythosaur is down there, which was something that I thought would be impossible. I thought they had all been killed off or had, they did something to them. But as soon as he steps in the waters, he goes under and she dives in right after him. And I actually liked that underwater scene, Catherine, where you just couldn't really make out anything. And
yeah, because once she came upon it, because she mentions before he goes in the water, the legend about how, Mandalore the Great tamed the great mythosaur in the mines. It's like, that's all bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably, maybe it was true at some point when they used to be around, but because you wouldn't think that something that huge is going to be living down there, and none of the people on Mandalore knew about it. Even if they believed it, that they weren't aware or worried that it's kind of, there. Because even in Clone Wars, you never really get the mythosaur legend. And so seeing it, and, when you see that tusk, it's like, oh, shit. It's like, and then it's there, and it's like, it was amazing. It's like finally seeing, because I've never bothered looking up what it's supposed to actually look like. Because I've just seen the skull, and then seeing it, you didn't get a great view of it there, but you kind of get the idea of it. So obviously we're going to see it in full form, full rage soon.
Yeah, this is like the whole basis of a huge cultural thing. And I had actually talked about how much I liked in episode 1 that we were seeing cultural aspects of the Mandalorians. And here we kind of got the mother load in this one. Not only did we read the plaque of them being there and having Bo-Katan, who is a major big deal in the history of Mandalore, being there at that moment, but for her to witness it as well, she saw it as well. I think this is giving her back her Mandalorian mojo. Certainly, she must realize that there's something worth saving on this planet. And I think you made a good point, Catherine. If I wouldn't want to have to rebuild on this planet, like it seems like an impossible task. But I'm wondering what's going to happen with that mythosaur. I guess it's still sacred waters. I guess it's still all of this. I mean, after all, Bo-Katan herself went into the sacred waters. So from just the symbolism point of view, she also bathed in the waters, almost like a renewal of faith and a kind of a baptism for her. I really like this whole element of it. And her kind of pulling him out, of course, the jetpacks still work underwater as well. So
and their masks don't get flooded underneath, even though there's clearly nothing, blocking the water. Like, I guess there's just enough air in there to keep the water out.
Exactly. And there were even some times, Catherine, where when Din first got onto Mandalore, he said he was going to put his mask on and put the seal on so he could breathe. And certainly it was good to see. You could actually hear the breathing element in his as he was walking. It was like it reminded me of Darth Vader. It's not exactly like Darth Vader, but you could hear like a breathing element. Did you notice that as well?
A little bit.
Yeah, it was really unbelievable. So so after we see this, and this is pretty much the end of the episode. I remember Bo-Katan saying things like how her father had fought in the siege of Mandalore or whatever. I'm trying to remember, who is Bo-Katan's father, Catherine?
I don't remember, because again, the Siege of Mandalore is something that's barely covered even in Clone Wars. It's kind of in the midst of happening when the focus is more on Ahsoka and Maul in that instance. And then it's been a long time since I've seen the Catan episodes of Rebels to remember the exact storyline with her and Corky and all those people. So I can't really remember who it is, but the thing we get out of it is that she and Din have more respect for each other now.
Yeah, it really, things have changed overnight. This is not, I had kind of made a joke about Din going in these waters and it being like Lake Minnetonka, but the real Lake Minnetonka, kind of making a joke about it. But this whole thing has changed a lot of the tone of everything in the show rather quickly. And, I'm thinking to myself, well, what will the next step be? Is Bo-Katan actually thinking that she needs to be with Din right now? Is she looking at this as, clearly something that's maybe prophesized, even because she's kind of been avoiding him like the plague, hasn't she?
Well, yeah, she's bitter. She wanted the Darksaber and she didn't get it, and she didn't feel like challenging him for it. So I guess she felt that she would lose, or maybe she didn't think it'd be honorable to challenge him for it. I'm not really sure, because on the one hand, Paz Vizsla had no problem challenging him for it. So if she wants it, and more to the point, the fact that she knows he doesn't have any intention of ruling Mandalore, he's just kind of treating it as like a prop, then that's all the more reason for her to challenge him for it. But for whatever reason, she hasn't been doing that for a couple of years. And now we've gotten her, and they still haven't addressed like the why behind that or what exactly she was up to. And given the implications of everything changing overnight, they probably will never address it. It's just like, oh, okay. So they just kind of left her for some. So we'll see what's going on. I mean, I take it we might learn why everybody left her, or maybe she left them. We don't really know, but I admit I was surprised the episode ends when it does, because it feels like, okay, the Mythosaur, it's like, yes, it's a little adventure. It starts as an adventure of the week, but something they've been building to for a while. You have your 50 sci-fi references. You get that significant story development with her getting the saber, the newfound respect, the Mythosaur, and that part two there's going to be a part two to this. It felt kind of like it's really kicking off and then just stopped, which I was a bit kind of like, oh. So I do look forward to next week's episode. But this, I think, did a much better job at least giving us a clue as to where the story's going, as opposed to the premiere, which was just kind of, checking in on everybody.
Yeah, it did feel like an abrupt stop, like, your things were rolling along and then it's like, we're going to cut it off right here. And someone's like, are you sure we want to cut it off here? I'm like, yeah, we got to cut it off here. There must be some other major development.
Yeah, you didn't get their reaction even when they're still literally coughing from nearly drowning underwater, and you don't hear what their reaction to any of this. It's just, oh, it just cuts to black.
Yeah, it was quite abrupt, and I'm not quite sure. I think they wanted us to just look at it from this point of view and say, okay, fine, that's how things are. But I can't help but notice the difference in, and I did already mention this, how well Bo-Katan was able to use the Darksaber versus Din. He still kind of struggled with it, and he was kind of holding it downwards. And he still he's keeping it, but I think that at some point she's going to have to help him. I didn't think it would ever happen, but we have seen it between Bo-Katan as well as why can't I ever remember this woman's name? But I remembered it before. Her name is
the actress.
I'm sorry?
The actress, you mean?
No, the other Mandalorian she used to practice trying to wield.
Casca Reeves?
No, the other girl who was who had the lightsaber and was practicing with Bo-Katan in Clone Wars. Her name was Sabine Wren.
Oh, okay.
We saw them practicing together, and I think a Jedi was helping them. I don't remember if it was that Jedi who was training Ezra or what it was, but someone was helping them. Is Bo-Katan going to show Din how to use this Darksaber, Catherine?
I don't think so. She's got the saber now, and that's not something that you just pass off between partners like a normal thing, you know.
But I thought she gave it back to him.
Did she? I thought she because again he lost it. She picked it up. It's fair game for her to use it, and
Yeah.
so I don't remember. Did she give it back to him?
I think I think she gave it back because, and the reason why I know is because after she rescued him, he picked up his weapons, and the Darksaber was one of those weapons.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I think that based on the rules, it's like it's not simply that it was lying on the ground either. He lost it in a fight, and she saved him with it, proving herself in a fight. So it's like, does it matter at that point if because inevitably people who possess the Darksaber over time, you know, eventually they just die of natural causes or whatever. Or they die in an accident, and the next person gets it anyway. So yeah, he's not dead, but he wasn't able to keep it on his person. He lost it. So
absolutely. Like I was quite amazed by what I was seeing with that, Catherine. And maybe for those of you who are in the who are watching along, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but after she saved him, he started to pick up his weapons, and the Darksaber was one of them, and he put it like in his holster, or you know, like in his pack of stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, she just let him have it back. Like I think it's very interesting. I have a feeling, Catherine, that we're going to see the saber switch back and forth between Din and Bo-Katan a few times in this series. Not only that, I think that once Din convinces or tells everybody that the mythosaur is on Mandalore, people are going to start questioning, is it true or not? I mean, if somebody, you know, kind of splurted out that the mythosaur is down there, and that maybe there might be other things down on the planet that are worthwhile getting, you know, it could change a lot of things for some people. But I am so much at a loss, Catherine, as to what the other clans are thinking. I have no idea what direction they want to go in. We already know that the Children of the Watch want to stay to themselves. We know that. They don't like outsiders. They don't like people who show their, you know, take off their helmets. But what about all the other clans? What are they doing? We just don't know where their direction is. What do you think about that?
Well, it's again like Bo-Katan said, they scattered, and they're now just mercenaries out there because they were initially believing in a cause till Din had the Darksaber and had no intention of leading Mandalore, which to me would be grounds enough for any number of Mandalorians to challenge him. You think that with Bo-Katan as drunk on the Kool-Aid as she is, that she would have challenged him for it at the end of season 2, because you know she was shocked that he was the one who had it, because she made such a big point that when we go in there, I have to be the one to take Gideon. And so you'd think she would have challenged him. It's like your whole thing is about trying to get this saber. He gets it, and you just kind of let it stand. So maybe she was telling the truth that they're all out there being mercenaries, or maybe she did something to piss him off and they kicked her out, or maybe she just turned her back on them. Again, we don't really know. And like you said, unless he's going to tame that mythosaur like the Mandalore before him and ride it up onto the surface, how many people are going to believe that they actually saw the mythosaur down there? Unless they're able to record it with a camera or something, you know?
Yeah, I don't think a bunch of people are going to want to go onto Mandalore anyway. She's comfortable on Halakava. I hope I'm saying that right. I think I had heard that he grew up on Concordia, but I couldn't remember if it was I didn't know Concordia was so close, because I was always under the impression that Children of the Watch had hid way far away from everybody else because they didn't want anyone to know about them. But maybe it's a little different than how I interpreted it. If they were only one moon away from Mandalore, Catherine, all this time, I had no idea that they were, you know, relatively even in the same, you know, system or parsec or whatever you want to call it. That's not so far away. Here's where I grew up in Concordia. She's over there, and here's I'm like, gee, that's kind of like literally right down the road, you know, not at all.
But maybe that's why she knew the planet wasn't cursed, because she's kind of aware that it's, you know, an abandoned wasteland. Because you're right, if there was a bunch of Imperial activity or all that kind of, if all the stories that have been put out there are true, then obviously she would know about it. And that's why she had said they're not true, because she knows, because she's like right next door. And because of the, you know, the scavengers and the native population and the, you know, all that kind of thing, it's like, yeah, there's nothing for it. She's like, there's nothing for it to be down here. I mean, her planet certainly looked nicer. Excuse me, like the moon that she lives on, certainly more well off. But I guess she feels that given, like, even when they're underground and you're seeing the beautiful ruins of Mandalore, she's not talking about it in a very respectful way. It's kind of like, yeah, it used to be great. She keeps speaking in past tense about it, which is probably why she's not really game to prove anybody wrong about Mandalore, because in her opinion, there's nothing worth saving there anymore. It's all gone. Like, she says, this was a great civilization. It's over, which is why she's telling Din, there's nothing magical about the waters. The creed doesn't matter because there's nothing left to salvage. It's all gone. And that's kind of why, she wants that saber more so just to unite the clans as opposed to literally camping out of Mandalore.
Yeah, this is very different than how I thought this was going to turn out. This is a lot faster to this point. Honestly, like you, and I think like a lot of people may or may not have thought that this was going to be a much more drawn out kind of experience for Din, where he was going to have to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out and maybe discover some other ancient relics.
Yeah, because it seems like when he asked her about it last week, that she could have just accompanied him with it and they get it done in like 3 hours and that'd be it, It didn't, like, especially the way they've been building up the return of Mandalore in this series. And now that we've seen it, it's like, okay, it's beautiful, but in a sense, Bo-Katan's right. It's abandoned. It's a ghost town. There's nobody there, and nobody in the Mandalorians camp has the capital to rebuild Mandalore and bankroll that kind of stuff, So
yeah.
So seeing it was, in a sense, it's really cool, and I like the 50s sci-fi stuff, but it is slightly underwhelming when you consider the way everybody's been talking about this. We're finally going to get there, and it's like, okay, so it's kind of just another planet, like, with caves and monsters like we've seen in season 2 or season 1. And so I do wonder, like you said, they unless they take R5 and make him go, spelunking after the mythosaur to film it and get evidence, then which they might do, who knows? So we'll see.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned R5, because there's one scene in the story where when Bo-Katan brings Grogu and R5 back to Mandalore to rescue Din, we notice that R5 plugs into Bo-Katan's ship. And, he kind of like, at first we see a picture of, let's say R5 recording or seeing where they are on the planet. But I have to wonder, Catherine, did R5 discover anything else on Bo-Katan's ship that might surprise him, or that he might feel is necessary to share with Din or Grogu? I mean, he's already like pissed off.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Every time the astromech plugs in, they got access to the network. So whatever she might be hiding, if she stored any of that in her ship's databank, he's got it. But then again, he might not have to resort. Din might not have to resort to these shady tactics, because it seems again like he's on good terms with Bo. So we'll see where that goes.
Certainly, and maybe, and I've kind of been saying this from day one, episode 1, that Din was so much in the dark that he didn't know anything, and I'm almost wondering if the information that R5 might have downloaded from Bo-Katan's ship might be exactly what the Doctor ordered for Din, with the information he needs in regards to everything that's happened that he doesn't have access to. Now, all of a sudden, this astromech plugs in to Bo-Katan's ship, and Bo-Katan doesn't know, or maybe she'll find out, but, he just decided to plug in to her ship and get access to the port. I can't help but think that he's going to gain a lot of information and maybe even warn Din about certain things that are going on, stuff that Din was completely in the dark about, because nobody wants to talk to him about the details of what happened. So I think that that's definitely a possibility of what's going on there. And of course, I don't think they would have teased those Purgles to us if we weren't going to see those Purgles, at least in this show.
I think that's also a build-up because of the cross-pollination with Book of Boba Fett and the upcoming Ahsoka show and Skeleton Crew. They're just kind of, like casual fans who haven't seen Rebels, who don't know what that is. They're going to see it, and they know that they're going to ask their Star Wars friends what that is, and they'll fill them in on it, but they're certainly going to reestablish what the Purgle are in live action for those who don't know. But because I think inevitably we're going to find Ezra and Thrawn in the Ahsoka show, because that's kind of what she was doing. And I heard a rumor that they reshot the epilogue from Rebels in live action because, reiterate that that's kind of what the focus of that show is going to be, because we know that Ahsoka's on the hunt for Thrawn. And I would presume she's looking for Thrawn more so to find Ezra, because she knows Ezra went with him and wants to find Ezra. Because really, as we saw from the sequel trilogy, granted that threat started up in the unknown regions. At this particular timeline in the story, Thrawn hasn't really been shown to be doing anything. Like, nobody else in these Mandalorian crossover shows has any knowledge of a Thrawn, except for that former Imperial arms deal that she was interviewing, or that she was interrogating. So I take it that her main goal is to find Ezra or finding Thrawn, because she thinks that's going to lead to Ezra. Because Thrawn, in other words, isn't really doing anything unless it's revealed that he escaped Ezra's, wherever Ezra took him, and has some master plan. I don't know. We'll find out. But I think they will establish the Purgle. They're kind of easing fans into these types of things, you know.
Absolutely. And, like you said, you felt that he would definitely need a new ship. So maybe the N1 might be one of many, honestly, going forward. But to be honest with you, Catherine, I was just so excited for this episode. And really, it went super fast. And yeah, just a lot of surprises. I guess I should have known when she read the plaque that the mythosaur would be there, but I didn't think we'd see that. And of course, as you said, Bo-Katan is very close to the planet. So perhaps she knows it's not poisonous. She's probably gone down there a few times, but she doesn't see the sense of going down there. Like, is there really any purpose? And she would have never gone into the mines had not.
Well, right, because she doesn't believe in any of the stories. Like, she tells them those were just old wives' tales for the culture. It didn't mean anything. And she's like, now that there's literally no civilization left, and to her that makes it even less of a reason to care about the creed. Whereas Mando is saying, no, that's the opposite is true. It's precisely because we don't have a home or a civilization that we need to believe in the creed and the culture. And I take it you're going to see a change in her this season as well, now that she's seen, the mythosaur and realize that, there's some of these things have a basis in fact.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm just saying hi to everybody. Hi to Tom Jr. Jackson and Dahlia Meyer. Donnie Pearson, hello to you. Everybody who is here today as we're talking about this episode. Gary Bando Sandwich Worthington, who had maybe my favorite comment today. The spa trip for Mando didn't go as planned. So there is that. And let's see what else.
By the way, that mythosaur is so huge. There's no way it would have ripped his leg off if it grabbed him and pulled him down. Like, how is it barely touching him that he doesn't have any broken bone, nothing? He just gets spun down. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it was huge. And, I think that you're right. I don't know why it didn't do anything to them. Maybe it was an accident. He was not expecting anybody to jump in the waters, and maybe no one has really jumped in the waters. So it might have frightened him. Julian Mushkin is here as well. Hello, Julian, who says that the events at the end of season 2 really shook Bo-Katan's confidence. For sure. We also have Six Scale, who's here. Hi, Six Scale, who says, bring me the mythosaur. And we all want that. And of course, OG fan when Star Wars, which is Star Wars. Hope you are well. But it is very interesting. I think that this was, for me, it was an exciting episode. There were a lot of twists and turns. I think it was a good episode. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. I know that it's not perfect. What were your overall thoughts of the episode, Catherine?
Fun. I like that we finally see Mandalore and get an idea of what's going on there. I like that, we have the mythosaur, the indication that the story is we get an idea of what the overall plot of the season is probably going to lean into now, which is good, even though it does feel like it's ending kind of abruptly, not at the natural narrative point where it would end, which is when they decide to leave and go make a game plan for where they're going. So I give it an 8. It was or like more like a 7.5, 8. It was enjoyable.
It really was enjoyable. And I think, as I said, there were a lot of twists and turns. We got to see a Grogu not able to always save everybody, be the victor. And that was important for us to not see that, because he needs to be just, a regular character sometimes and not always have all the answers. He got scared. That was good. He even stayed back when Bo was like, you have to show me where he is. And he's like, no way, man, no way. Like, in his mind, he was like, there's no way I'm going down in there.
Oh, no. Shit. Well, it's funny. Another line when Bo says to him, what, did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian? Which I thought was kind of interesting, because he gives her this kind of look, almost like, are you one?
Yeah. And I think that he is starting to learn that there are other clans, that there are other groups. And, Grogu, this is, of course he was in the Jedi Temple. He had, access to resources that, are incredible. But now he's getting what I like to call, what is it called? Real life experience out there in the galaxy that he's seeing. And he's seeing a lot of things go down, and he's probably seen a lot of things that someone his age shouldn't have seen. But this is what he needs to know to survive in this world. So it's a good thing that he's kind of getting this real life experience out there, and kind of being scared sometimes and knowing when to ask somebody for help is
Well, yeah, because he knows his limitations. Because we know he could have saved him from it, but it would have probably knocked him unconscious, like when he took down the Mudhorn. And he knows that I can't afford to get to pass out in this dark, scary tunnel place, which is why he runs away to go ask for help, which is smart.
Yeah, he hops into his repulsor pod and gets the hell out of there, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. And we also saw him hop into Pele's arms when he saw her after a little while. She's like, "Where's my little guy?" And he kind of hops out. So it was a lot of fun seeing that. But yeah, I can't wait for the next episode, Catherine. And I do want to thank you for joining me for this review of episode 2 for season 3 of The Mandalorian. Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at SlySnide. You can find me on the Fantasmagorium Show YouTube channel, hosting right now Capes, Cows, and Crusaders on Tuesday nights at 6 Pacific, and also Lightsabers, Blasters, and Droids Friday nights at 7 Pacific. Of course, it's a Star Wars show. We're covering Mandalorian right now. And then you can find me on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month on the Unifying Force live streaming 8 a.m. Pacific.
That's fantastic, guys. So please do check out Catherine and all those locations. Guys, you can find me here, obviously, on Positive Fandom. I am going to be covering tonight at 2 a.m. I think, a Picard season 3 watch party for episode 4. So please do check that out. But guys, thank you so much for your support. For everybody, Tom Jr. Jackson, we are all good people. OG fan, what's Star Wars or just Star Wars? Yeah, street smarts. That's what I like. Grogu.
Oh, and also an OG fan said about wanting a hot toy of that droid. Absolutely, that is epic. Rob will be getting one of those.
Absolutely. They better make one of those. I'm looking forward to that. That thing will be insane. Going from thing to thing, and then all of its parts, and then just the head and that eyeball that's behind the glass. That was just spectacular.
They could add a touch by putting like real water inside the orbs, like the eyes, because it looked like it was covered with like red liquid. That'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can actually find out what that creature is, which I'm looking forward to. But I did just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. As I always say, Tom Jr. Jackson, we are all good people. Thank you so much for your support, and for everybody who turned out. And hi, Grogu. And guys, I look forward to seeing you at the next review and the next live watch party. Do check out both our channels for Catherine and I, and like and subscribe. I love it. And guys, always remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.